Welcome to this new episode of Unleashed. In the previous episode, we reflected on what it takes for one to move from an operational level into being a CXO. What shifts one has to make from being very, very good operationally to playing the wider role of a CXO. Reflected with Shalini Pillay, we reflected with Sarika Naik, we reflected with Shashi and Dan Powers on their experiences and their perspectives around what it takes one to become an effective CXO, what it takes one to be a very effective senior leader. Some of the interesting takeaways from the previous episode included how one has to build in that stronger, wider picture of the customer as well as the wider picture of the organization. We also reflected about how one has to have very deliberate, structured networking, which is both win-win in terms of ensuring that you have a win-win relationship being built. We also reflected about how foundations have to be strong, both from building a strong track record of good credibility. And we also brought up that one of the fundamental gating criteria is to have good mental and emotional readiness to be a CXO. This episode, we will continue to reflect with Shalini, with Sarika, with Dan and Shashi on how does one build a presence. Very important about being an effective CXO is to believe that you belong to the room, is to believe that you are an equal contributor, if not one of the most strategic contributors to the issue being under discussion. To believe that you are equal or as important in a particular situation requires some amount of cultivation of that presence, requires some amount of practice. And I think there are both institutional and personal efforts that need to be put in to keep you ready for that role. We will talk about how one prepares, how one uses different roles one gets to build that perspective, to build that presence, to build that acceptance in a particular group of senior leaders, as well as how organizations have put efforts to groom people to those levels. Let's begin with my reflections with Shalini. Shalini shares her journey and how different roles she has played has helped her to build that wider perspective and a very strong presence.
So 20 years in this organization. For the longest time, I moved from business consulting to consulting. It was at that point that leadership came to me to say, we've been wanting someone from the line function to come and run HR for us. End of the day, I'm being given an opportunity to lead HR. I'll get to learn HR on that role. That kind of a role doesn't come to you very often. On the back of that role, I was then I had to be on the leadership team because one wanted HR to have a seat at the top table.
And have a bigger view of things.
And have that view. I got onto the board of the firm. So I took that on in 2013. And honestly, the vantage point it gave me, I don't think I would have ever got in any other format. Did that for 5 years. And around that time again, as it so happens, the firm came up with the OMP structure, which is Office Managing Partner, where we said that some of our offices now have grown to be large enough regions where you need someone like a mini CEO overseeing a region who then becomes a face for the market there. To me, that sounded like, again, it was a great way to move back to business. So in 2018, I moved back into business, transitioned out of the HR role and started looking at Bangalore as a region. Even there, one realized when you're looking at a region, suddenly you again see a very different opportunity.
Yeah.
Because you're suddenly looking at a market standalone and trying to see what do you need to do to actually get more competitive.
And which services will make sense to that?
What makes sense to that market? What's driving growth in that market? How do you do it?
Yeah.
1 year into the role, I realized that the GCC market, the Global Capability Center market, was more than 50% of the business here. We didn't have anyone as focused on it. So that's when I put my hand up and I said, I want to do this because for 2 reasons. It's the largest segment of my market is GCC. It took me back to finance and shared services experience, which is what I used to do in consulting. So I was confident of knowing that space well enough. And above all, it also would give me credibility as a leader.
Correct.
See, when you move from HR back into the business in a role like that, you could be perceived as one more layer in the system. Or you are now bureaucratically one layer that is overseeing, but what do you do? So to me, taking on the GCC role was important to also re-establish credibility. Like I said, 1 year into that role, I took on this and then I pulled the firm together. So 4 years I've been running the GCC channel. Today, the market recognizes what we do for GCCs.
Wonderful.
So it has taken a while, but as a leader, it made sure that I kept some critical skills in our business relevant. And I was changing, upskilling and keeping some of that pertinent. So people, when I first started in the OMP role, Srini, I literally had to tell people, take me back to clients. I need to go back into the market. And I used to run after them. Today, my calendar is booked from the Monday to the Friday night and I don't need to ask anyone. People are reaching out, my partners are reaching out to me to say, can you take us here? Can you introduce us there?
Yeah.
So it's a big, I'm saying recognizing some of that to say, how do you stay relevant as a leader? How do you build credibility as a leader? How do you influence people to want to work with you is important, because otherwise in large organizations, you can be viewed as someone who's over the hill and not adding value, but there because of seniority, because of whatever, and you can very quickly get dismissed. I'm just saying that I feel that in this journey, you've got to constantly make yourself relevant and ensure that there is credibility around what you do.
Yeah. If I summarize slightly differently what you're really at there, at one level, I think different roles you played has given you a wider perspective. So I think if I start with what you started saying, people narrowly focus on their function, their area of work. And as they grow, they need to move that, looking it from a much wider perspective. The wider perspective first is from inside out of the organization, how I represent the organization. But as you grow, it's an outside-in perspective of that, saying what does the market need?
Correct.
What does the customer need? So therefore, you're not understanding the market only from your limited technical capabilities, but you're looking at it from their holistic needs, and therefore you can represent. The roles as you play, I think I always call this as an hourglass. At the bottom, you build multiple skills, and as you come to the middle, you super specialize. As you go up, you are actually able to build multiple super specializations and take it to market. The role as HR has given you that bird's eye view of what are all steps that need to be taken. And you coming back to work with the customer, your again ability to look from outside into the firm and saying which part of the firm I can really build. But what you're saying in all these things is you have to remain credible.
Yeah.
Your credibility is to be earned. And I think that comes
It has to be earned. Don't assume it, because the world is changing very fast. People are very dismissive of, it's no longer the days where because you have a role and a title, people will look up to you.
Absolutely.
Not at all.
And what the customer looks forward to you. I think most important thing is, I think now what you really ended it saying is customer looks forward. Therefore, everybody wants you to be part of that meeting.
Exactly.
Customer looks forward to
and I have seen that, Srini. It's not been an easy journey. When I took the role in 18, like I said, I used to literally call everyday partners to say, when you're going next to this customer, can you take me? And I was at their mercy to say, will they get me to join them or not? It's not an easy one. Of course, because people knew me from my HR role purely based on goodwill and friendships, I got there.
Yeah.
One of the KPIs I had set for myself, which I do till today, because I was away from the market for 5.5 years, I needed to jump back in it. So I said to my secretary, I said, I want you to set up at least 2 client conversations every day in my calendar. It could be a small startup. It could be an industry association. It could be an acquaintance. It could whoever. But it was my KPI to expedite the networking and going back into the market.
Absolutely.
And I said, if on a day, if I see only internal calls and meetings, you are answerable as to why my calendar looks like that.
Absolutely. So, and you really said, because you're in the market and the market looks forward to you.
So today, and that I have continued since 2018. So a minimum 2 client conversations in a day, I have to do. If, for example, for some reason, I have not done it, And it may seem silly, but I will make sure I'm then participating in some industry event where I make up for that week of lost client conversations.
So you're really saying, I want to be, and I think you are the sounding board to the customer. You're really building that I want to be a sounding board to the customer, and I want to look at life from their perspective. And then I know my organization how to orchestrate it for them.
Yeah.
That's the role you're playing. And many of the individual partners may be still playing their narrow role. You can orchestrate multiple partners to deliver for that customer. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We learned from Shalini how at different stages of her career, through different roles, she worked hard, improve her presence, be credible and add value to the market. We will now learn from Shashi how organizations can play a role in grooming and getting you ready to play the right role. So once you are identified with this person, this potential, then how do you take him to that board level?
So first is having a conversation. I think the first thing that I have always done with my mentees is to establish that I'm there to help them succeed. Once that is established, everything else becomes easier because their acceptance of what you're doing with them becomes easy and they are also willing to change. So the first step is the Johari window exercise. Now, you see how the person is adapting and adopting the whole stuff into the real life and guesstimate and check the learning agility of the person. The faster the person is able to change himself or herself, higher the learning agility. And people who grow fast in organization are people who have high learning agilities. So you assess that. And obviously, somebody at a regional head level will not get into a CXO level in a quick span. It will take at least 7 to 10 years for somebody to graduate to that level. But everything has to be done in stages, and people will get the ability to have higher mental bandwidth, higher EQ, emotional bandwidth in stages, right? So that's how it works best. Once you see that the learning agility is high, then you start putting the person in front of slightly senior people, get him into forums, get him to work on certain projects which are under the eyes of the CXO, nurture him. For example, Sanjay did that with me very well. So I worked on a project called Business Enabling Functions Growth, and he literally handheld me. I worked on it completely, but he literally handheld me and put me in front of Mundan and Mr. Pai and all. And that was I was shitting in my pants while I was there, and he did the whole stuff. But the point is, he actually took me to the door and got me to experience that. And I'll never forget that day, because that was the starting point for me to get into a board meeting. So once I started seeing something like that, my dreams also started becoming bigger. So that's the next stage. So once you start seeing the person showing positive response and in a quick manner, you expose him or her in a very safeguarded way, protective way to a slightly bigger audience, larger audience, and manage the show for him or her and give him or her some experience as to how things done, how CXOs think, who are the CXOs, what are the questions that they ask, what is the forum about, what's the big picture. So that exposure goes on continuously for around, let's say around once a quarter or once in 6 months for around 2 to 3 years. That gets the person at ease with the topics that are discussed inside, with the people who are inside the board. And hopefully by the end of 2 or 3 years, the person should be able to manage conversations even without the mentor.
Many times you have gone through this journey, and I think you already said that when you first walked into the meeting with Sanjay, into meeting all the senior folks at Infosys, you didn't feel the part of the room.
Definitely, I was.
Now over the years, you started working on so many places, and you worked in so many other such similar rooms you've been to.
Right.
What point did you started feeling you belong to this room? You're also an equal person in the room. Whoever is that person there, whatever is that person's brand, when did you start feeling that you belong to this room?
So the day I started looking at my work as a very important part of the business, I started feeling that. The day for example, when I took up the Western region, before that, I keep coming back to Western region, sorry. That's one of the most satisfying experiences that I've had in my career. We literally turned around a region that was about to be shut down. I was asked to shut down that region, and I requested my business director for 6 months. And that region is still performing today as we speak. So the moment I stepped into Western region, the region was mine. The moment I started seeing that region as my region, and I am here to change that region, things started changing for me. The moment I felt this is my business, ye mera dhanda hai, things started changing for me. So nothing mattered to me but authentic commitment and drive to be able to take our region to a different level. So that's when I started feeling a part of the room.
With Shashi, we learn that how he has been handheld in different organizations to build the confidence that he belongs to a particular room, to build the aspirations to be part of the room. And he was also given the opportunity. Once the right opportunities came, he built the sense of purpose and believed that he was the right person to represent and drive that particular business to the next level. Automatically, the moment that kind of a confidence came, he believed that he belongs to the room. I continue to discuss with Dan the role of presence, how one can cultivate the presence, how one can be groomed to have the right presence. So here are my reflections with Dan. Certain level of, let's say, partners meeting happen. A youngster walking into it always struggles, overwhelmed by the presence of people. But he may be coming from a good background of talent, good background of good capabilities. I always believe that he is a part of the room when he believes he's part of the room. If he feels he's outsider coming into the room, waiting for these people to take him apart, then he never is a part of the leadership room. But part of people getting groomed, although however talented they are, however the network, is that confidence, that trust. So whenever I work with somebody, I used to make him sit. So you sit closest to the board guy. Don't sit the other end. You're taking orders and notes for others. You have your equal person. You're bringing in that talent which that room needs. And so you're equal partner to whatever is happening, decision making is happening. So how is your experience of bringing people into those forums, whether it's in a customer forum or inside the organization? In fact, I find inside the organization forums are more dangerous than a customer forum. Customer forums are probably more open to you listening, but inside organization has already discarded you, saying you don't belong here. How does one build that confidence being part of a room, belonging to a room, and really talk with a strong laid back confidence that he really can contribute to it?
Yeah, great question. I think there's several factors that go into it. Which you said, confidence is absolutely key, right? The confidence that I'm here for a reason, right? And recognizing that I'm invited to this meeting or I was asked in this meeting for a reason. And I think understanding, okay, what is my role? The better that I understand, is my role really just to listen, to take notes? Okay, then I will probably adapt my actions accordingly. But is it really to be contributing? That people value what I have to say. They're looking for insights. They're looking for my observations. And if I'm in the meeting and I know, okay, Srini, I've asked you to be in this meeting because I think you have something to add. And if you're being quiet and if you're not sharing, and if I feel that maybe you haven't engaged the way that I wanted to, then as a leader, my most effective tool is to ask you a question, to ask and pull you into the conversation. But it is confidence, and the confidence does come with experience, but it also comes from others reassuring, right? And again, everybody has their own level of insecurity. And the question is, how can we temper that insecurity, right? Nobody's perfect, right? And let me just do the best that I can. But that takes some experience to find your way through there and to understand, okay, the people around this room are just people like I am. They have the same thoughts, the same desires, the same objectives, the same goals. And part of it is just being pragmatic and understanding that I have the same connections to this world that these people have. Yes, they might be older, they might be a little bit more experienced. Yes, I can learn from them, but I'm also bringing a different perspective. So the more that we as leaders who've been in the room can reassure somebody and recognize that, hey, this isn't easy to step in to a very stressful and probably intimidating situation. What can I reassure? Can I continue to bring the person, hey, Srini, I know that you've dealt with this issue before. Maybe you can share with us the facts, how you came to a really good resolution, right? Which is reassuring, hey, this is why I have you in this meeting, and to get you to talk about something that's comfortable, right? And we should all be comfortable talking about things that we witnessed or we were part of.
I think what's coming out of your discussions, your points are that the issue is bigger than the personalities sitting around this issue. So you're in a room to actually contribute to an issue. So you're not trying to impress anybody else, but as long as you can contribute to an issue, focus on that.
Very much.
So the bigger the issue, whatever is the issue, you can call the issue is more important than anybody else in the room, because everybody in the room is to only solve that issue. But actually, my experience is slightly different when I went to some of these very iconic leaders in a room. Most of the leaders have their own agenda. They answer the questions to protect their brands.
Yes.
A lot of boards I've seen where the personality is more important than the issue there. And so therefore, they have everybody's got their own vested agendas in the room. And somebody new is always second guessing whose agendas are what. And that navigating that kind of a leadership meeting that requires some kind of a hand-holding for him to come there. And that's where I use the other leader to hand-hold him in certain things to navigate everybody's agendas so that he belongs to that room.
Yeah. And yes, we all know that we may use different terminology for it. I love agenda, but we also know that people have sensitive egos too. And to navigate through that minefield, it really is a political canniness that also, I think, is very important to somebody's success. And that's part of, like I said, the emotional intelligence, the situational awareness is the ability to maybe understand, even if I don't understand what their agenda is, I know they have one, right? And so I need to listen, and maybe I can discern what that agenda is. And maybe if I can serve their agenda, but at the same time serve the issue, I can get even more impact for my time and my energy and my contribution. So
when you have reached that level to be a part of the room, you've been invited to be part of the room, you have to trust that you've been brought in because of certain specific talents you're bringing. And as long as you focus on those talents and what it contributes to, the issue becomes very important, and therefore you contribute to that and you work. There is also a role, as Dan alludes in this talk, about the people who are participating in the room, who are senior to the person who's joining for the first time, is to help that person feel the part of the room, to help him, to prompt him to leverage his experience or her experience to contribute to the issue. We also reflected about how one has to be sensitive to different people in the room, of what perspectives through which they see the issue. And therefore, calibrating communications to different stakeholders in the room is also very critical. So these are all the learnings one has to do to cultivate the presence and effectively become part of the senior management group. So Dan talked about individual leaders' role in grooming new leaders into the right roles and into being part of the right forums to help them to build their presence. Here are my reflections with Sarika Naik of how organization can do structured interventions to groom such leaders.
Absolutely, this hand-holding not only helps you transition very smoothly, your confidence intact, but it also helps build your credibility with the rest of the stakeholders. So if you land in cold, it'll take you months to build back that credibility. First they will dismiss you saying, oh, this person has no clue of what we are talking about. Right. So it's very important to do this soft landing or soft intro, as you said. And exactly the way that you said, that first start introducing the topic, start working on some themes together, maybe in the back end, then bring him or her into that forum, largely as a shadow or an observer, and then start giving opportunities to speak up or voice opinion or own certain projects. This is exactly what we do in one program. And I know that there are many organizations who do that, but I do want to call this program because it's something that we crafted and I was one of the ones who started it. It's called Power Ahead, which is one of our women leadership program. Now it's taken another name. Mm-hmm. What we did is there are women who are just one level below the VP and who have the capability. Most of them are very technically sound women, but they are not able to surmount and move to the next level of the VP level, which is, in our terminology, is a more strategic thinker, like you mentioned, and is somebody who is able to look at the whole wide angle of Capgemini. And we found that no matter of training, networking and all was helping, like each of them had gone through multiple trainings. So it's not, but then we had this program which was crafted where we started inviting them, a few of them. It was a cohort of the first cohort was about 20. And we invited 3 or 4 of them to a meeting, which is the India Country Board. So people, all the India leaders are part of the India Country Board. I'm sure you understand that they meet every month and we discuss about what is relevant for all of India. First, they started as observers. And I remember the time when the first cohort, the first 3 women sat through it, they didn't speak a word. I could see they were very uncomfortable, shifting. They wouldn't even drink water, which was kept in front of them, Of course, we did our best to make them feel comfortable. The second time, when after another 6 months, the same ones came back, in fact, they felt more stronger about asking a question. So something that was presented, they were able to ask a question. And then when we rewound, saying that, what did you do in the 6 months from the first to this? We realized that they had started speaking up in their internal forums as well. Now, this was not for them to land into a new role, but I'm just saying that soft landing, observing, makes a big difference. And Shrini, also in our cultures, right? India we do have that hierarchy. CEO better hai, then nobody else should speak up. It's like what he or she says is gospel truth. So, especially in cultures like ours, bringing people in slowly, especially those who come from a very technical point, I would say, is a very good strategy. Otherwise, you are actually setting them up for failure.
Interesting. Very good.
One of the other things I would perhaps recommend also is, one is, of course, bring them in slowly. The other is help them meet such people in an informal network. It could be over lunch. It could be through an event. It could be any of those other softer ways, so that the people who are going to be the peers get to know the person a little better.
Sarika shares a very structured program from Capgemini of how people are exposed, groomed, nurtured, and made ready to be part of the senior management. She also shares how, as they participated over a period of time, their confidence and their sense of belonging to that room improves. So this is, I think, probably something more organizations can learn from these experiences Sarika is sharing. We so far talked about presence. We so far talked about how one can work on themselves to improve their presence, work on themselves to feel belong to a part of a senior management team, as well as how organizations can handhold such people, both individually as well as a collective program like what Sarika had shared. One of the things which always intrigued me is how much an environment has a role in shaping up leadership and perspectives and leadership styles of an individual. Here are my reflections with Shashi and Dan on this aspect of how environment may or may not be influential in shaping a person's leadership style and his or her ability to contribute to different aspects we've been discussing about.
Slightly different. You talked about, alluded to IMB work you do.
Yeah.
And you've been into different companies, let's say. When anybody passing out of IMB, assuming, of course, after the 2 years, people have improved whatever they have done, There all are, certain pedigree of people coming out.
Correct.
But different people going into different organizations. So let's say somebody has gone into an IT, without naming what company, an IT company, and somebody's gone into and is playing in the delivery or in the business unit role,
Got
and
it.
somebody's gone to McKinsey. Same
Got
back.
it.
My observation, somebody who's gone to the IT industry or any of those things 2 years later is more been changed to be an order taker, ensuring customer visits are being done, packaging his own company inside out. Is more an inside out view of life.
Correct. Correct.
Much more of a defensive approach, not to displease somebody. It's a much more inside out defensive because the customer, especially in a B2B environment, I'm talking. Whereas somebody who's gone to McKinsey, not McKinsey as a this thing, but somebody like that environment has built a lot of outside in view, and maybe in 2 to 3 years' time is comfortable meeting CXOs in the market. So, how much is an environment critical for somebody to realize their full potential? Although I think the pedigree is same. Do you think the environment is the issue or is the person an issue?
Excellent question. I would say both. I would say both, but I would actually give a lot of weightage to the environment and the manager or the leader.
Okay.
We've hired McKinsey as a consultant multiple times, and I know that even the junior most of people are very vocal and very confident in expressing what they feel. So right from, it's almost like born in a businessman family, and on the dining table, you're discussing business and numbers. You're so comfortable with that getting into a boardroom doesn't look any different for the kid as he or she grows up. McKinsey is like that, right? I am the other IT service guy, gone through the ranks and was climbed the stairs and realized that, arey, baat karna chahiye, milna chahiye, all of that. But people in McKinsey learn that in the first 3 months of their journey in McKinsey, right? Or BCG also. They're pushed into the pool from day 0 or day 3. That gives them, they're quiet for some time, but they are consciously told to present themselves. So it's like learning swimming. You're pushed into the water and you learn to swim in 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. But for somebody like me or an IT service guy, that realization comes very late in life. Frankly, it is so late that it's almost regrettable, right? Especially for somebody who is ambitious and wants to grow and so on and so forth. The environment is close to around 60% weightage, if I may say, all other things being equal, and 40% weightage to the person.
We reflected the same question with Dan. Is it person or the environment that matters in the growth and the ability of the individual to create the right impact, go into the right level of leadership? Here are my reflections with Dan.
That's probably a key question. Why are certain people able to cross and certain people are not able to cross? I think, it's like that movie Slumdog Millionaire, which is we're all the byproduct of our experiences and our life experiences. And there are certain ways that we're hardwired that I think that help us in that regard. And then I think on top of that would be our life experiences and the way that we've learned and grown from that also helps us. And I think somebody who may have had less than successful, who go back and say, okay, why was it not successful? What can I do better next time? I think those are the people who are going to be more likely to make the journey and make the cross, because they're always working on continuously improving. They're always asking themselves the question. They're always doing the post-mortem, if you will. And even if they're successful, the ability to always go back and be reflective. I think that's the key. I think it's a curiosity, right? And I think the people who are the most curious are going to be the people who have the better ability to maybe cross over into that higher level of interaction, that higher level of strategic thinking, because they're not just focused on what they do. They're also curious about how that it fits into the bigger picture. I always use the analogy of a kitchen, right? And to your point, if you're an order taker and you prepare, right, you're a cook, right? This is the dish I want. I know how to make that dish. Here are the ingredients. I'll serve you the dish. That's a cook. Okay. That's not a chef.
Yeah.
A chef is the one who takes a step back and says, hey, let me create a dish that others would want. And that's a chef. It's a higher level of creative, and I would make the argument, right? Higher value, because there are less chefs than there are cooks.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really strong point that you made, which is, okay, being an order taker and successfully executing on an order is critical, right? It's important. But sometimes our clients will call with questions, and we can answer that question, right? But I think the person who can sit there and say, okay, how does that question fit in the need, right? Is that even the right question? So to be curious and add the context of why that question's even being asked, because it may be, yeah, that's important, but that's not even the most important question.
So you're saying anyway that environment doesn't matter. It's your sense of curiosity. Even as a cook, I'm asked, challenging this thing, can I do this better? Can I offer something more? It's more about you. And some people comfortable settle into an environment. Some people challenge and curiosity, and then they go forward. Is that something?
Yeah, but I think the answer is who goes to work at McKinsey versus who goes to work for the IT. And I think there is a little bit of nature that's embedded in that, right? Because yeah, and you're absolutely right that it is the environment, right? And it does help nurture that mindset and that broader base and higher level thinking to have that CXO conversation. But look, everybody who gets an accounting degree doesn't go into public accounting.
Yeah.
And again, it's that consultative mindset. And I think there are people who do go into public accounting and don't necessarily have that or don't develop that. And ultimately, they probably leave public accounting because that becomes, as they continue on and advance in their career, not only an expectation, but a requirement. And it is, I think it's a combination. Yes, the environment, but people choose their environment.
Very interesting perspectives from both Shashi and Dan. Shashi believes that the environment has a significant role, and so does Dan agree that the environment has a significant role. However, Dan brings out a very interesting perspective that you choose the environment. In the previous episode, we talked about what does it take us to move from being an operationally excellent guy to playing the role of a CXO, and what kind of a wider dimensions, both outside in and inside out, one has to develop. But in this episode, we really talked about two very critical things. How does one build the presence? How does one believe that they belong to that CXO group? How does one believe that they really are the integral part of the senior management? What is the role of the individual in grooming that? And what is the role of the organizations? How organization can play the catalyst, it can groom and nurture the person. I think it's a combination of these two. It's a combination of having the self-confidence that you belong to the group, as well as taking the help of an organization to actually groom oneself into the right roles. We also reflected a very controversial issue of what is the role of organization environment in limiting your ability to play to your full potential. We explored with Shashi and Dan, people from similar pedigree, similar background, which growing into being different kinds of leaders, growing into leaders who probably can, over a period of time, be those who are guiding other leaders, or growing into leaders who are probably more operationally focused. Conclusions through these reflections were that I think environment does have a say in how you shape up yourself, but it is totally up to you to build the right presence, right ability to play an effective CXO. In the next episode, we will reflect whether these journeys are different for women leaders.